Hi, it's Claudia, and in this video, we are reviewing the book, The Five Love Languages. Now, I picked up this book some years back while I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and social phobia. Now, the thing is that I didn't realize the extent of my unhealthy beliefs and behaviors. So when I picked up this book, I didn't realize that I was totally codependent. So the way that I read this book was basically I was reading line by line and I was just thinking to myself, my husband doesn't do this, my husband doesn't do this, my husband doesn't do this. So I read the book completely wrong. I totally misunderstood the book. Now, the reason why I picked it up was because my husband and we were on the brink of divorce, and I eventually realized, okay, after years and years, I realized, okay, maybe there are things that I don't know about that I should learn. So I picked up this book, but then once I started reading, instead of focusing on what I should be learning, I focused on what my husband wasn't doing. And unfortunately, I brought these complaints to him and I was like scolding him. Look at what you're not doing. See, you should be doing this. You should love me this way. And I was completely oblivious to my own behaviors and to what I was doing. And unfortunately, I was doing things the opposite way of the love languages, and I was confusing that with love. And that was a big problem in our marriage because in my opinion, I was a very loving person, but the truth is that I was very controlling. Not because I was controlling on my own, but it's because that's what I saw growing up, and I was taught that that's love. Now, the actual book is an actual manual for us to learn the five love languages. Now, the author is teaching us in this book that there are five love languages, but that most of us have one or two primary that come naturally to us. And, we just do these, we don't even think about it. They're totally natural and probably semi-conscious because it's just how we express love. But then that means that there are four or three other ones that technically, according to Jesus, we are supposed to learn them. We're supposed to actively and proactively learn these other languages. And he does that. He teaches us all the love languages in the New Testament of the Bible through his commandments, his teachings, and his example to us as his disciples. So we are meant to learn to express all the five love languages for our own benefit as independent people and not codependent people, and especially as Jesus' disciples. So let's look at what the five love languages actually are. So the five love languages are words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. Now, what's great about this book is that the author is teaching us through, his research and the things that he's doing in his work with counseling people and as a pastor. But he's also teaching us through the stories of the people that he counseled. And he's teaching us what the love languages are and what they are not. And unfortunately, in my personal case, the problem is that I thought I was expressing love, but it was actually codependency. The love languages are about expressing the love that we already have for someone and that we already feel for someone. Now, Jesus teaches us that sometimes we are supposed to love people and to love our enemies, but the feelings of love might not always be there. That's not something I ever knew before I met Jesus. So love is a choice. We choose to do the right thing, and then we choose to express our love, whether we feel the feelings of love or not, through these five love languages. But the thing is that the way that I was taught is like, okay, so I'm a good person. Therefore, I'm a loving person. Therefore, these things that I do are loving. And they were not. And then Basically, I was doing things that I deemed loving, but the reason I was doing it was not to express love, but to get my husband to do what I wanted him to do. Basically, to love me in the way that I thought I needed him to, when in reality, I was actually looking for the love that only Jesus can give to us. So, this is what this book is teaching us, what love actually is and what it's not, because especially my generation has been taught codependency, and we are taught that, like if we do this, then we will get some sort of a result. Like, for example, if we do our homework, then our teacher will be pleased or our parents will be pleased. So then we learned basically to do things in order to get something from other people, and that's codependency and basically control and manipulation. It's not love. So let's look at an example of what the author is teaching us about what the love languages are and what they are not. For example, a wife might pressure her husband to look for a more lucrative job. The wife thinks she's encouraging her spouse, but to him it sounds more like condemnation. But if he has the desire and motivation to seek a better position, her words will bolster his resolve. Until he has that desire, her words will come across as judgmental and guilt-inducing. They express not love, but rejection. So this is what I had been taught. I had been criticized growing up by my parents, by most of my teachers, and I was told that it was done out of love. Now, in reality, based on Jesus's teachings, they're not, because Jesus never controlled anyone. He always gave people the choice, the free will that God gifted all of us. But then I was taught, like I was controlled growing up. This is how I changed my behavior, by being criticized and by trying to avoid feeling so bad while I was criticized. Unfortunately, because this is all I saw, then I became this critical person and I kept criticizing my husband. So I was so critical that by the end of our unhealthy part of our marriage, I just couldn't think of anything good that he was doing. And then I deliberately started making lists about the smallest things that I thought he was doing right. And then in a few days, I realized, wait a minute, he's doing all these amazing things, and I totally missed it out because I was trying to get him to change by believing that criticism is out of love, and it's really not. Jesus is the one who teaches us what love is. So let's look at this scripture. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4-7. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So I had no idea. And actually, I was doing the opposite of all these things. I was rejoicing in evil. I was, criticizing. I was doing the whole thing opposite from what Jesus teaches us. But I believed that that's love. So when I was doing it, I believed it was love. But then when other people were doing the very same things to me, I believed that they were abusing me. And in reality, this is abuse, you could say it, but I do prefer to make the distinction between someone who knows that they're doing the wrong thing and they're doing it, and someone like me who sincerely believed that I was doing the right thing, but it wasn't the right thing. So I wasn't on purpose trying to abuse my husband to make him feel bad. I was just trying to improve him by criticizing him, which is totally the opposite of what Jesus teaches us. So this book helped me to understand the difference between actual love and all these lies of the enemy that I ended up believing and confusing with love. But this is actually, I was able to, because of course, the first time I read this book, I read it all wrong. But then I reread it years later, right after I met Jesus. But before I read this book, the second time after I met Jesus, the book that actually led me to Jesus is another book from Dr. Gary Chapman and Dr. Jennifer Thomas, and it's called When Sorry Isn't Enough. It's about the 5 apology languages. And this book, When Sorry Isn't Enough, actually taught me to take full responsibility for my actions. Regardless of what other people do or don't do, I am fully responsible for the things that I do or don't do. That's what I learned from that book. And then I was able to read the 5 Love Languages book and truly understand the difference between love and control and manipulation, whether done on purpose or not. So then the author goes on and he teaches us about quality time, something again I had totally misunderstood and confused. So let's look at what he says. By quality time, I mean giving someone your undivided attention. I don't mean sitting on the couch and watching television together. A key ingredient in giving your spouse quality time is giving them focused attention, especially in this area of many distractions. Quality conversation is quite different from the first love language. Words of affirmation focus on what we are saying, whereas quality conversation focuses on what we are hearing. We must be willing to give advice, but only when it is requested and never in a condescending manner. So this was for me revolutionary, because even though I hated being criticized, so receiving criticism was horrible to me, for some, because sin is blinding, I thought giving criticism was a good thing, like just the insanity of sin. This is just what it is. So this is what I learned, that basically we don't, and this is what Jesus teaches us, of course, like he says, do not cast your pearls before the swine, meaning do not give advice to people that they're not ready for it. And the thing is that we don't get to decide when we should give the advice. It's the other people who get to decide when they are ready to receive it. And now that I am healed from all the craziness of the complex post-traumatic stress disorder and the social phobia, now I can tell that it's much easier for me to receive advice and feedback when I'm asking for it than when someone decides, oh, this is what you should be doing now. I still do it because, of the commandments of Jesus to love our enemies and do good and forgive them, but it's just a longer process nonetheless. So then let's look at the love language of gifts. A gift is something you can hold in your hand and say, look, he was thinking of me, or she remembered me. You must be thinking of someone to give him a gift. It doesn't matter if it costs money. What is important is that you thought of him, and it is not the thought implanted only in the mind that counts, but the thought expressed in actually securing the gift and giving it as an expression of love. Now, around the specific love language of gifts, I grew up with a lot of trauma. So my parents, they had lived their whole lives during the communism in Romania. They were very poor, and because of this oppressed situation that they were living, they pretty much the whole country, they just developed a mentality, a narcissistic mentality of only thinking about themselves. So my parents, they, on their own, they wanted to be seen as good people and good parents. So they chose expensive gifts that they never cared whether I wanted or not. They made sacrifices to buy me those gifts. And in return, because of this codependency, they were expecting me from 3-4 years old and on for me to be overexcited. Oh, look what I got. But because they were abusing me at the same time, I was also completely isolated, and I wasn't allowed to have any friends pretty much until I was, let's say, about 15 years old. So I wasn't, and I didn't go to kindergarten. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone when I was in school. So basically, I never saw people be happy when they got gifts. So I didn't realize the extent of their expectations. So then what happened was that my mother kept cursing me that you don't know how to be happy and you'll never be happy and you'll never whatever. And then they would take away the toys. So all of this stuff around gifts, it traumatized me, and especially this expectation to be so happy when I actually didn't care about the gifts at the time. What I wanted with my parents was actually quality time, I remember. So what happened was that I grew up with all this trauma, and then when I got married, me and my husband, we made this unhealthy agreement to just not give each other gifts. So for 9 years of our marriage, we only bought each other gifts once, the first year. That's when we decided we're not doing this again. And then we were basically ignoring this important love language. But then I met Jesus, as I said, and I was healing. I was getting healed by keeping his commandments. And then I was at the point of, okay, I'm going to decide to process these traumas around this love language. And then I learned this love language in particular. And what happens is that basically we have to learn all the love languages, because it's like we need to be nice to people and kind to people and speak words of affirmation for them to want to spend quality time with us. Once they spend quality time with us and we get to know them, then we are in a position to give them gifts that are meaningful to them and not to us, because the gift is for them, so they're supposed to enjoy it. And also we're in a position to speak the love language of acts of service and actually help them, and not, make them accept the help that we think that they should be getting. And then, of course, the most intimate love language, which is physical touch. So we are meant to learn all the love languages. So now let's look at the love language of acts of service. By act of service, I mean doing things you know your spouse would like you to do. You seek to please her by serving her, to express your love for her by doing things for her. Such actions as cooking a meal, setting a table, washing dishes, vacuuming, cleaning a commode, changing the baby's diaper, dusting the bookcase, keeping the car in operating condition, paying the bills, trimming the shrubs, walking the dog, changing the cat's litter box, and dealing with the landlords and insurance companies are all acts of service. They require thought, planning, time, effort, and energy. If done with a positive spirit, they are indeed expressions of love. So this is another thing that's very important, that I spent the first 9 years of our marriage trying to basically force my husband to feel loved by my cooking and cleaning. And over the years, once I was healed from all this insanity and oppression of the enemy through my own sins and unhealthy behaviors, I realized that my husband had been trying for all those years to explain to me and to share with me his true feelings, that he would have rather spent quality time with me than me spending all this time in the kitchen cooking him something he never cared about. And yet I was so blinded by my own sins and my own false beliefs that I believed the enemy, that for 9 years, almost every day that we were together, I would spend hours in the kitchen cooking and making cakes and expecting him to feel loved and then to give me in return words of affirmation. And it never happened because I misunderstood the whole thing. But that's the thing, that the love languages are an expression of the love that we feel, period. They're not meant in any kind of way to get the other person to do anything, whether they like it or not, whether they accept it or not, whether they're happy about it or not, whether they love us back or not and express that or not. We are meant to express love because we feel love and because Jesus commands us to. So then let's look at the fifth love language and what the author says about it. Physical touch is also a powerful vehicle for communicating marital love. Holding hands, kissing, embracing, and sexual intercourse are all ways of communicating emotional love to one's spouse. Now, in the area of physical touch, in this love language, I was also very traumatized growing up by my parents and by the church, the false church that I grew up in Romania. It is the mainstream church. It is the Orthodox Christian church. So it has nothing to do with the Bible. Not one thing that I was ever taught from there has anything to do with the truth that Jesus teaches us. But I was traumatized, especially in the area of sex, to the point where I was just unable to. I felt so much shame and guilt and condemnation around it that I would just avoid this whole subject with my husband. And for years, we were just not able to have a healthy sex life. So then what happened when I met Jesus? This was one of the first things that I wanted to work on. And he actually delivered me from all the shame and guilt and condemnation around this subject when I watched this video series from Pastor Jimmy Evans called The Fig Leaf Conspiracy. That's when I understood that sex is from God. It's a gift between two married people, a man and a woman. This is what this is. And then in these parameters, we're meant to enjoy it. And that's when all the guilt just completely went away, like in a second. So this is what the love languages are. They're all healthy and we're meant to learn all of them. So what I struggled the most with the book, the first time I read it, was everything. I was completely blinded to the reality that it's a manual. It was basically written for me, teaching me how to express love. And again, love is a choice. It's not necessarily always a feeling. But Jesus commands us to love our enemies, to do good and pray for them and bless them, which is, of course, what I learned the second time I read the book. So I do recommend this book because as a disciple of Jesus, he teaches us that this is how people will know that we are his disciples, because we love one another, but also because we love all the people, because God loved the world and he sent Jesus for all of us. And for all of us, we were at some point the world before his disciples. So we were part of the world and we were sinning and doing the wrong thing, and we had no idea what we were doing, and we were actually against God, but we probably didn't know it, most likely. And then we turn to Jesus. So now Jesus is asking us to be loving and to show the world what real love is. And this is what this book is teaching us, what actual love is, because the world is teaching us at this point codependency. You know, like give flowers to your wife so that she's happy. No, that's not the reason. And it's more of a transactional thing than it is an actual expression of love. So this is the book, The 5 Love Languages. I love it. I do recommend it to everyone. It is part of what saved my marriage. As I said, of course, Jesus' teachings, but also what God taught me through the other book that I read from this author. So When Sorry Isn't Enough helped me to be able to be in a position to read this book as it was intended, which is a manual for us to learn the 5 love languages. So I hope that you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Please don't forget to click the like button, the subscribe button, and the little bell button to get notified of future videos. And I'll see you next time. Bye.